Welcome to Breaking Bread. This is Matt Kaufman, your host. Before I introduce our guest and topic, let me get a quick housekeeping item out of the way. Our listeners use a variety of venues when listening to Breaking Bread. If you use AC Central, please note the location has changed. Podcasts will not be available under the sermon menu, but instead they will be available in a dedicated area called Studio. This option should appear on the home menu of your AC Central app.
As your parenting goal is to point them towards God, and in the things that they do well to help them celebrate God's creation and celebrate who He is. And the goal in this life is not that we would be great in our eyes or other people's eyes or even in God's eyes, but that He would become greater in our eyes as life goes on.
Brian Sutter and Craig Stickling are with me today.
Good to be here, Matt.
It is great to be here.
Brothers, the topic today is going to revolve around the strengths that our children have. They have strengths and weaknesses, but what role do we play as parents to steward those strengths?
Been just thinking of the verse, train up a child in the way they should go. And I think part of the picture there that the Scriptures is teaching is not only train them up in the ways of the Lord, but also recognize who God's created them to be and encouraging them in that pathway too by being able to see what they do well or where they're interested.
To be looking at our children and to be seeing who they are as God has created them. And then we get to be part of that, of their lives. And that's a joy to have.
I know a brother who has encouraged me and others who says it's your responsibility as a parent to know what your kids are interested in and help them even find that interest. Because sometimes it's not so clear.
Because that child's been fearfully and wonderfully made, there's something there we have to look for.
That's the presupposition that it is there. It is planted there.
Exactly.
We were just in Colorado recently, and there was a certain mountain that we went by, and people said, in that mountain, they said, it's very interesting. There is a lot of precious minerals and gems that are in that mountain. And you look at that mountain, and you don't see anything. Our kids are going to require us to get out the shovel, and let's do some digging. And we might have to dig multiple spots to be able to find something, to be able to help them explore something that connects with an interest that maybe they didn't know that they had, or a talent that maybe they didn't know that
so
they had.
What does that look like? What does that digging part look like? Provide a little bit of application. What are some tools here to do this?
What are they good at? What is it they always seem to be drawn to? That they're just interested in, that they always end up reading this book, or they always end up doing this thing with friends, or if they have 10 minutes to themselves, what is it they're just kind of naturally drawn to and picking up on that? Sometimes we're going to need other people who aren't digging right with us day to day to help observe, maybe a grandparent who's going to be able to say, boy, I see this in your son. And you're like, all I see is that they won't do X.
Yeah.
Or a teacher or another brother or sister at church who sees them interacting at Sunday school, that you're going to need to give people from different angles who see value in a mineral that you're maybe overlooking because of all the hard work that you're doing.
I've experienced that personally, Brian. It also challenges me to look into the lives of the other kids around and do that for others.
Yeah.
A great challenge in that is our kids are exposed to things that we love to do as mom and dad, right? And yet the opportunity comes to say, okay, what are some things that maybe I don't necessarily do that maybe my child would be interested in doing?
I think that's fascinating, Craig, because I want my kids to like what I want to do. It's like, okay, love the outdoors like I love the outdoors. And sometimes you just can't make that square peg fit in that round hole.
And I think that's so important for parents to realize is that God has created their child for a purpose, and it's probably not to be an exact replica of you. And that can be really frustrating for a parent, but it is really frustrating for a child too if they're trying to be shoved into a hole that they're not made for. So,
right.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, so thinking outside of the box of what my particular interests are. Okay, so what might that look like?
A couple things that come to mind is check out a library sometime. Go through the different books on different activities or things to do, and go through one of those with your kid and see what, as they go through the pages, and be like, hey, you know what, we're going to look through this book. I want you to, let me know of the page that you're like, hey, that would be something that would be interesting. Museums or things like that also have a wide range of different things to be able to walk through and to say, hey, these might be interesting.
So I hear what you say there. One is academically, but the other one is experiential. as you do experiences, maybe making our kids exposed to a variety of things.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Just branching out into different areas than what you would do day to day. Another thing I like to challenge parents with is let your child lead for 15 minutes. You just lead, yeah. So they just take the lead. You just sit back. You say, for 15 minutes, you decide what we do, where we go, what we talk about, and parents don't get to offer any correction. They don't offer any direction. They're just along for the ride. And doing that consistently sometimes can begin to form some ideas of maybe where they're going to go naturally if they get a chance to lead. And that it may just give you some ideas.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Here's a little story that happened. I was encouraged by some to include my kids in projects and that type of thing. Again, for this concept of inspiring interest, finding interest. I am not a mechanic, okay? So I had to fix my lawnmower deck or whatever. I thought, all right, gonna bring the boys around. Hey, we're gonna tackle this, right? I'm not only 2 minutes into this thing, and I didn't have the tool to do what it is that I just gave them audience to watch. It was all crash and burn, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, I guess Dad doesn't have the tool for that. But even so many times I'm like, man, I wonder what my boys could really run with, but I don't even have the tool set to launch it.
And that is hard, but I think what a great opportunity just to expose that. And if they kind of get interested in it, at least in the back of your mind and say, wow, I know brother so-and-so who does that, and maybe they would be able to help us at some point, and we could go over and do something at their house. Or even just, you talk to a brother at church over lunch, and you ask what they did on a Saturday, and maybe it's completely different than what you would do on a Saturday, but that gives you another idea of maybe that's something that I could explore with my 12-year-old boy.
Sometimes we're going to try something, and it's not going to have the desired outcome, or maybe we all tried something and was like, wow, this wasn't very fun, was it? No, not at all. Hey, we just learned something together, didn't we? And
all we learned is what Dad can't do. Hey, that's a lesson worth learning, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there could be plenty of room, right, to learn there.
Okay, so here's a question for you.
They do need to learn that sometime.
So here's a question. Once we find that, let's say we find that expertise or that value, that thing that they're really good at, how now do I stroke them in a way that is helpful and not harmful? Am I right? It could be harmful?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I think that would be probably one of the challenges that we run into, if not most frequently, very often, where somebody's identity or value gets wrapped around their giftedness. And so for sure we want to avoid this picture that says you are valuable because you can make a beautiful, woodworking project.
Yeah.
Or that you're top of your class in math. That's going to be detrimental.
Or you're the best on the ball team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the sort of things that we want to avoid. We want to be able to see those gifts and encourage those gifts, but not because those are what give them value.
So there's really I think there's some fine line here. I'd really like to kind of hash that out a little bit. So what is some of the vocabulary that we would use? How do you let them know that you are incredibly proud of them, but yet your pride doesn't sit in this sphere that you've just encouraged them in? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's great to be reminded, right? We want to worship the Creator more than that which is created. Be mindful of how to direct that back in our own child's thinking that they have that, and it's as a gift from God. And to be reminded that whatever they do well and maybe even exceptional, to be able to remind it that that is a gift from God.
So that's helpful, Craig. So really what you're saying is what you're always doing is complimenting God through your kid. Is that a lens maybe?
Yes, absolutely. That you're always primarily focused on, as your parenting goal is to point them towards God, and in the things that they do well to help them celebrate God's creation and celebrate who He is, and that the goal in this life is not that we would be great in our eyes or other people's eyes or even in God's eyes, but that He would become greater in our eyes as life goes on.
Okay, and so I love that it points them back to God. Okay, so now I've got child A sitting next to child B. Child A is terrific at mathematics. Child B hates mathematics, feels like they're stupid because of it, right? All right, so now I praise child A in Godward, right? And child B hears God has forsaken them in mathematics expertise. Does that make sense? I mean, I wish this was hypothetical, but it's not. You know what I'm saying? Now we've got like two kids that we're working with. Does that make sense? Speak to that.
It is. It's so easy for us as parents to say, I love you because, and we fill that blank in with a gift rather than we love them because they're God's creation. So that language would be a tweak.
All right, I think that's key. I think, Brian, you've just uncovered something. What more needs to be said on that point?
What we want to do is to say, sweetie, I love you. You are my daughter.
Yeah.
Whereas it's really easy to say, boy, you're great because you helped do the dishes. Or I'm so thankful that you're so good at math. Wrapping what we appreciate about them or their value on what they're able to do or not do, instead of back on, like Craig said earlier, them being God's creation.
Redirecting them into their identity, right? Mm-hmm. Their identity is that they are created by God. And that is sufficient to be full of glory and thanks and praise for the rest of my life. We are not valued and worth because of what we do. We are valued and have worth because of who God is and who He has created us as.
Is there some wisdom and discernment we need to take on what we praise? And you've already said some of this wonderfully about God and that type of thing. But let me paint two people here, okay? One who the mathematics lesson comes as a breeze to them, right? And they get flying colors A+. And the other one who worked incredibly hard and got the C+. Does that make sense? Mm. And sometimes when we lavish the praise on the one that it came easy for, and the one who worked so hard and yet didn't pay off is void of that affirmation, are we stroking the right things? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that would be really apparent. I would encourage parents to praise and encourage hard work rather than achievement,
So that's another lens, right?
Yeah,
as we think about this, there's like a character lens or whatever that we're looking at.
You want to focus on character that pursues Christ.
Right. I think that's helpful as we think about comparison, because so much comparison goes on in this conversation.
And you kind of get that picture from the biblical example of the talents or the gifts, and some were given more than others, right? What was the goal? What was the point? Is what did you do with what you had?
To be called well done.
Yeah.
So Rebecca and I have been recently convicted. She brought it to my attention that we do this. So I've got one child who is messy, disorderly, right? We're always hounding, all of that. And it's been brought to our attention that perhaps we're missing a strength, that she has kind of a Mary's heart, is able to sit at Christ's feet, right?
Yeah.
And let the mess pile up around her.
Absolutely.
But
You're speaking to a lot of kids here in a second, Matt, so keep going.
All right, here we go. But here was the revelation. We're trying to make a Martha out of a Mary, and Christ praised the Mary.
Exactly.
And so what is it, even in my own rubric and metric of what I want my kids to do, sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to that part where we talked about so often we want our child to be us rather than our child to pursue God. And that what we end up doing is we elevate our preferences to these like spiritual attributes that are good, when in reality is we would just like a clean supper table.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And for us to zoom out and say, you know what? Is this really wrong? Or is this just different than me? Is this who God's created them to be in their personality? Or is this truly a sin? And I think that's really hard for us to distinguish as parents, more harder than we like to admit.
That's such a challenging concept. Okay, what do I want from the character, from the heart of my child?
And sometimes with that a teenager is just trying to figure out, where do their interests lie? What are the things that they are good at? And parents can see that rebellion sometimes when in actuality, all they're trying to do is figure out, where do I fit? Where do I belong? And it doesn't fit in exactly to what mom and dad see, but it's not necessarily wrong.
We have such a hard time with failure, don't we? And not being successful at something. And maybe that's just bred into us. And we have this belief that, even as Christians, everything should go right all the time. And the reality is that won't always be the case. And some of our kids will try something. They might try out for a team and not make it. They might want to take on this project or this goal or get a job here, and it doesn't work out for them. But to be able to teach them through the failures that there is a great, great opportunity to learn from.
So, Craig, I want to push you on this, right? Because this is life, right? Kids come home having failed. How do we handle this failure piece, right? We've talked a lot about how do we handle the success piece. How do we handle this failure piece?
Pointing back even to, like we talked about earlier, the character, like praising the character that they would try, that they would give it a go, and it didn't turn out. But you tried. You went for it, and I think that's incredibly brave. I think one of the things that I would see with parents sometimes is that we're so worried about our children's feelings getting hurt or something hard happening that we are very protective from them, like protecting them from failure, so we won't even let them try. But that accidentally creates more damage because then they never do learn what they're good at. They don't learn those life mistakes. And I would say, too, they don't ever learn how to fail well, which is a really important skill as you're going to walk through life.
Reaffirm that, does God love them any less because maybe they did not make this or they didn't get this job? You know, what a great principle to remind them of who they are in Christ. But then allow them to look at the scenario, step back for a second and do a little discerning. Was I prepared? Had I done my homework? Had I practiced or prepared on whatever this job or activity was requiring? Did I do those things?
And what I hear you saying, Craig, is responsibility. And that as parents, we need to keep responsibility in front of our kids. And my tendency as a merciful person is to kind of let my kids out of responsibility. That's kind of my default if I'm not watching it in this moment of failure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I think our culture rewards independence, doesn't it? Independence on its own will not necessarily bring a healthy biblical self-worth or view of themselves in a healthy way, but it's that independence plus responsibility that grows them in a way that will bring glory to God.
But you're suggesting that independence of itself is not the worthy goal. Say more about that.
So independence is going to require that they're able to do some more things and maybe even some things outside of their comfort zone or outside of mom and dad's comfort zone. But with that, then parents also have to help them bear the consequences that come, whether good or bad. That's part of the responsibility piece, that if you have too much independence without any responsibility, you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble as you mature and walk through life. But if all you have is responsibility without any independence, you're not going to ever get in any trouble, but you're not going to learn anything either.
Sure. And you allow that experience to be the teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
And independence that is unfiltered and just allowed to run rampant allows people then to blame others and to get to be a victim.
Craig, what I'm hearing you say is if excuses are prevalent, that might be an indicator that we have independence without responsibility.
Yeah, I would certainly say that that'll be a caution piece to take to address with our kids.
I think we can taste that. Now, I know we've been talking a lot about strengths, but Christ said to Paul that my strength is made perfect in your weakness. So is there some steering that goes along with, okay, so we know what the weakness is?
An interesting piece on that, Matt, is, when we look at a weakness, is that something that's just for a season? Is it something that is more of just a deficit that we have in our human frame that we have to carry from birth till death? Is it something that through awareness and growth and understanding that we're able to minimize that weakness over time?
Yeah. And in that, if it falls into that category of this is just one of those lifelong things, it is a weakness and it's going to be hard and it's going to be difficult, but it's there for a purpose. The main purpose of weaknesses and struggles tends to be to help us remember that we still need Jesus, and that might be the case for ourselves or for our child.
I want to go to that point exactly, Brian, because I think that's brilliant, and it's so Godward that presenting that need for Jesus is key, isn't it?
Yeah, and so often, for me personally, it is through those places that I don't do well, and I'm put in those places where it's something that I don't do well, or I'm asked to serve in a place of weakness. It just keeps driving me back into Christ, and I think that's the report of Scripture as well, and no doubt it's going to be true for our kids, and we can celebrate that.
Yeah. I mean, that brings very closely here, again, another observation that my wife and I made is that we're trying to produce the oldest child in the prodigal son rather than the younger one. That's just kind of what we've realized, that we kind of want our kids to turn out like that oldest one rather than to go through the swine necessarily, to bring about that born-again experience that's necessary to repair my children. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes so much sense. And the error you see in the older child is they don't see their need for the Father. They don't see their need for Jesus.
And perhaps they've misplaced that strength.
Yes.
Right?
They've been very obedient. They've done all the right things. They've made people happy all their lives, but they've missed it.
Yeah.
Someone can get lost in a strength just as easily as someone can get lost in a weakness, can't they?
Yeah.
And both of them need to be used with care to be focusing back to the purpose, as Brian said, about God's desire for us to follow Him.
I think you brothers have really given us some really good things to think about. What are some parting thoughts?
I'd like to just encourage mom and dads to have fun with this.
To your point about minerals and precious stones underneath a mountain, I think every miner has got to be an optimistic person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every day has got to be the day they're going to really make the bank. I mean, I don't know that you could possibly do that without being optimistic. And to your point, there's a lot to be optimistic about. Brian, how about you? Parting thoughts?
As a dad, there are times that I want to see strengths in my child and help everybody else see how they're better than other kids at that. And I think that's such a foolish, wrong mindset. And instead, if I can help see gifts and strengths in other kids and that I can help my children celebrate another child's strength, again, I think that helps balance this picture of we're all underneath of God's authority. He's created us all. And that I can celebrate the thing that this person over here does really well, even though that's an area that maybe I'm gifted in, but they even do it better, or I'm not gifted in and they do it incredible. And that's such a wonderful thing to teach.
Yeah, I love that picture, Brian. And I love the idea that what a talent and a strength and gift is not an opportunity for my kid to elevate themselves above others, but it's an opportunity that God has given them to serve and to be able to be used with that talent and gift on behalf of the kingdom. I've had the opportunity too, Matt, to reflect on this maybe from a little bit on the other end of the spectrum here as my children are all in their 20s now, and to be able to look back at this topic and to acknowledge, there were areas that I missed, and yet I am just amazed in the graciousness of God and how He cares so deeply about our children. He is at work in our kids' lives. And it's been beautiful to see, even in some of my children, strengths that came out that I didn't even know.
That you didn't discover.
I didn't discover.
That God reveals the diamond in the rough, maybe when we miss it.
Yeah, and a beauty of that is when they're engaged and supported, by a loving church family, that collectively helps grow them in that direction that we're all desiring as well.
That's great. Thanks, brothers, for shedding light on this, I think, very important topic, and I think is a great deal of help for myself, I know for sure, as parents. So thanks for being here. And to our listeners, thanks for listening in. We trust this has been helpful. Goodbye.